Professionally, I work for the Health Experiences Research Group based in the University of Oxford, and we're a group of largely qualitative researchers who go and collect patients' experiences of health and illness, and we write lay summaries of our research and publish them on this website, healthtalk.org. Part of my role within this group is to try to make sure that we hear the voices of people who are seldom heard, in inverted commas. Some people are invisible, we just don't see certain people, and some people aren't listened to. And I had a chuckle on Twitter recently where some young mother sort of tweeted to say that a social care professional had said to her that she was in a hard-to-reach group and she was seldom heard. And she tweeted saying, well, I'm actually talking all the time, so I think that actually you're not really listening to me. And it made me chuckle, this whole sort of unproblematic positioning of people as seldom heard. Certain people, if, for example, you have learning disabilities, that identity often trumps any other factor of who you are. And so, for example, if you're doing a project exploring the experiences of people with breast cancer, you wouldn't necessarily think of including any learning disabled people within your sample because they're learning disabled. I think quite often we don't think about hearing certain stories. We're completely disinterested in certain stories. I think there's sometimes a fear attached to hearing certain people's stories. It can be seen as too hard, too time-consuming. And again, if we use the example of learning disability, there's a sort of sense in which they aren't able to give coherent narratives without sort of actually thinking the narratives are coherent within their own context. Generally, we don't understand the importance of listening to these stories, of listening to these marginalised groups, and I think that this is such an important oversight. If you're in a marginalised group, you're on the edges of society, and if you're on the edges of society, you're forced by this positioning to examine the workings of that society, social life, the structure and agency of health and social care, in a way that you don't if you're in the mainstream bit. So to hear those insights would actually inform the way in which health and social care, society more generally, obviously, is working. An example I want to talk about is actually our son, Connor. Connor was a hilarious young man. He was diagnosed with autism and learning difficulties, and he had epilepsy. But he enriched our family life in a way that is indescribable. In 2011, I started blogging about Connor. And so I would capture just snippets of everyday life where there'd just be conversations with Connor, or Connor would illuminate our lives in some way. And here's one example, Elby and the failed kebab, where Connor's talking about how his meal preparation at school failed badly because he was making a kebab but didn't have a skewer. And so I ended up saying to him at the end, well, what did you eat then, Connor? And he said, bits, Mum. Which is really hilarious. And we had these droplets of funny stories that just happened literally daily. So they're captured on the blog, so that was great. But when I started writing the blog, I thought about Connor as a little breaching agent, my little breaching boy, because he was breaking the social rules in a way that Garfinkel, a sociologist, used to encourage his students to go out and break social rules, to make visible the sanctions surrounding these unspoken rules that we all stick to. But as I began writing Connor on the blog, I realised that he was less of a breaching agent and more of an unlikely ethnographer of normality. Now, some of you in the room will know that Connor actually drowned in a short-term assessment and treatment unit in July 2013, and the story is still unfolding. I'll come back to that. But I wanted to think about listening, and I wanted to think about really listening, and listening properly and carefully, and Les Back has written a wonderful book called The Art of Listening, which I recommend. One example was the Autism Project I mentioned earlier. I was recruiting people to take part in the project, and this woman emailed me saying, I'm an adult with Asperger's syndrome. I can't find a way for health people to listen to what I say. Its communication isn't good. I get confused. People do not wait long enough for me to get to what I want to say in order, so they fill in the rest of the sentence, and I get scared. So I sent her the materials for the study in the post, and then I emailed her a few weeks later to say, did you want to take part? And she replied, no, I'm scared, I'm not clever. I don't really know what's wanted. I think I have nothing to say. Now, this bothered me quite a lot because I thought the structure of our study, face-to-face interviews, is actually excluding this woman from taking part and sharing her study. And so after a few weeks, I suddenly thought, oh, well, I could maybe ask her if she wanted to do an email interview, which was outside the protocol of the study, but was a way of including her. She agreed straight away. We had 6 weeks of exchanges, which were nothing short of magical, I have to say. And I think not hearing these voices leaves understandings of health and social care experiences impoverished. And I think that's a really important gap. And the reason I didn't sort of to go into much description about who is seldom heard is because I think it can vary depending on what's being said and in what context. And if I go back to my blog and our personal experience of what happened with Connor, ironically, slightly, it turned out that the trust who were looking after Connor, or not looking after him as it turned out, actually were monitoring my blog from the moment he went into the unit. So they were actually reading the stories I was writing, and they were actually reading the fact that I was worried about him having increasing seizures and the fact that they weren't really paying attention to this. But instead of listening to what I was saying, and instead of taking it seriously and critically thinking about what I was writing, they had a lens of defamation. So I think who is seldom heard can vary depending on what is being said and what the context is. And then I just wanted, because I didn't want to end on a real Captain Bring Down finish, I thought I'd put this wonderful quote from Hannah Arendt up. And I think this really does capture what we should all aspire to. Imagination alone enables us to see things in their proper perspective, to be strong enough to put that which is too close at a certain distance, so that we can see and understand it without prejudice, to be generous enough to bridge abyss of remoteness until we can see and understand everything that is too far away from us, as though it were our own affair. Thank you, Sarah.